Thank you, Rector Hardy, and good morning to all. Graduates, I've devoted my professional life to studying how people learn, so I thought I would share some thoughts on how you can keep learning after you leave the University of Virginia. Now, I expect your reaction to that is, right, lifelong learning. How nice. Listen, I don't need to be inspired about that. I'm already kind of on board with the idea of lifelong learning, so maybe another topic. And I understand that reaction. For everybody graduating today, learning's kind of your thing. You're all really good at it. But hear me out, because although you may not need inspiration for lifelong learning, I think you might need guidance. I predict that, say, 10 years from now, you won't feel like a lifelong learner. I think 10 years from now, if you're like most college graduates, you'll be saying, "What happened to me?" You know, I used to be kind of intellectual, like I was interested in stuff. Now, anything I learn is for my job. So that's a gloomy prediction, but here's why I make it. What learning means to you has been shaped by the way learning works in school. In school, you learn the stuff that somebody else has decided this is what's important for you to know. You pay attention to it even if you're not interested in it, and you continue to pay attention to it until you not just understand it, but until you've committed it to memory. That approach to learning makes sense for the type of things you need to learn during your school years. But after graduation, you shouldn't think that learning always means mastery and that learning always happens in a class. But because that's the way it's been for most of your life, that sense of learning is going to be really hard to shake. So, for example, 10 years from now, you might think, I've always wished I could speak Italian. So what are you going to do? You're going to treat that like a class. You're going to download Duolingo. You're going to make your little plan of studying every day. But the truth is, you're going to be really busy, too. That's going to be hard to sustain. Every time you open your phone, that smug little owl is smiling at you. And so eventually you're going to delete the app. Or 10 years from now, you'll join a book club because you'll figure that'll kind of force me to read the books that everybody's talking about, like that new biography of Senator Miley Cyrus. But the book club is going to make you feel like you're right back in class at UVA because once again, you're sitting with a group of people you don't know very well, trying to think of something to say that sounds smart and won't reveal that you haven't done the reading. The problem is that many of you are going to be in demanding jobs. Many of you will have families, and learning the way you learn in school is also demanding. Something's got to give, and it's not going to be your job, and it's not going to be your family. To be successful in school, you had to trick your brain into learning in a way it didn't evolve to learn. That's why it felt so hard. As you move into this next phase of your life, I urge you to adopt an approach to learning that's less effortful because it's better tuned to the way the mind naturally learns. So what does that look like? A good guide is to observe children in preschool. Preschool teachers have to capitalize on this sort of natural learning because the kids aren't old enough to have learned how to do the unnatural type of learning yet. There are 4 characteristics of learning in preschool that I think are a useful guide for you for lifelong learning once you leave UVA. First, preschoolers don't study or commit things to memory, but preschoolers enjoy new experiences. They enjoy exploration. A preschool teacher might keep a lizard in a terrarium, not in the hopes that the kids are going to memorize lizard body parts, but in the hopes that kids will be excited simply to watch it and to ask questions. The innate drive to explore is something we share with many other species. Animals that have regular territories where they forage or hunt will skip a territory that they know generally pays off in order to have the opportunity to explore a new one. In lab experiments, humans do the same thing. They'll skip a known reward in order to explore something new. So what's the point of this innate curiosity? Well, that seems obvious. It's useful. There's an advantage to knowing about your environment. But there's a little more to it because we're not simply about collecting information about our environment. To give you a sense of this, play along with me for a moment. What would be your first thought in the following situation? You wake up, you go into the kitchen to see about breakfast, you open the refrigerator door, and you find a bowling ball. What's your first thought? If you're like most people, your first thought is some version of, who did this? Right? Now note, if you were just a collector of information about your environment, you would use this new fact, bowling ball in my fridge, to derive new conclusions about your environment. You could use deductive logic and say, that bowling ball must be cold. Or you could use inductive logic and say, I now know that refrigerator shelves are strong enough to hold a bowling ball. But most people don't do that. They want more information. They want information about causality. Humans aren't just collectors of facts about the environment. We want to understand our environment. So the first preschool principle for lifelong learning is that you should replace your very definition of learning. Don't think of learning as memorizing or mastering. Think of learning as exploring and understanding. Second principle. Preschoolers are curious, but their curiosity is very short-lived, and the same is true of adults. You have learned to maintain attention even when you're bored, and again, that's a valuable skill for certain types of learning, but it's not the brain's natural tendency. Curiosity is the brain's way of signaling to you, there's something cool out there, pay attention, you're going to learn something. But your brain only cares if the cool thing is out there right now. In other words, your long-term interests play no role in determining your curiosity. That's why you might take a subject that you know you're interested in, and yet somehow the professor makes it boring. You can tell your brain, no, hang in there, this is cool, we really like this, and your brain is still like, I'm dying here. Then on the other hand, a friend might persuade you to watch a documentary on something you think you have no interest in at all, say type fonts, and you find yourself fascinated. Almost all social media apps use the same strategy to deal with the tiny time window of curiosity. An algorithm selects what you're going to see next. Algorithm is really a fancy word for, well, you liked this before, here's some more of it. Or better put, here's some more of it, but we'll make it just different enough so that you have to watch to make sure, yep, that's the stuff I liked before. So naturally, after an hour of TikTok, you don't feel satisfied. Curiosity is meant to help you learn about and understand your environment, but the algorithm clickbaits your brain into seeing the same sort of thing over and over again. Preschools don't engage children by giving them the same stuff they've seen in the past. Instead, a preschool classroom has several work centers, leaving the children free to select whatever piques their curiosity. The teacher's happy for the child to select any of them because they're all enriching. This is a good strategy for you as a lifelong learner. You need to ensure that your internet foraging grounds lead to learning that actually feels like it paid off. So, always have books on your phone, both Kindle and audiobooks. Bookmark websites like JSTOR Daily and long reads in the New York Times. Put these apps front and center on your home screen and make TikTok and Instagram and the rest a little harder to access. The second principle for lifelong learning, then, is to curate your environment the way a preschool teacher curates the environment of the classroom. Surround yourself with novel, enriching, easy-to-access information. Third principle. Preschoolers are creatures of habit. Any parent will tell you changing a child's routine, even in a way that seems trivial, is asking for trouble. I'm reminded of the time my oldest daughter, who was about 3 at the time, refused to take a bath because, quote, that water is too wet. That meant was there was more water in the tub than there usually was. Routines make for a predictable environment. That's comforting for a child. That's one reason preschool classrooms lean heavily on routine. But adults are fond of routines also, partly for comfort, but even more, we feel that our routines make our busy lives more manageable. Most people, when they start their first job, fall into a weekly routine of when to pay bills, when to do laundry, and so on. There's usually not much free time, so trying to shoehorn in a new activity, for example, practicing your Duolingo Italian each day, is likely to fail. Here's a better strategy. Don't add learning activities. Tweak old habits to make it more likely that you'll experience and understand new things while you're doing them. If you listen to a lot of music, try experimenting with different genres. If you have lunch with a friend every other week, try a restaurant with a cuisine that neither one of you know anything about. And wherever you find yourself, actually look around. I was at the University of Virginia for 10 years before I learned that buried not 100 yards from my office is an author whose 19th century book sales rivaled Webster's Dictionary and the Bible. I learned that when I was walking from my office to a meeting at the School of Education, and I decided to get off my usual path and walk through the cemetery. So the third preschool principle for lifelong learning is to avoid an ambitious life overhaul and instead increase your learning opportunities by tweaking your existing habits. Now the fourth and final principle. I frequently address groups of parents on the subject of education, and I'm often asked, how can I get my kids to love learning? I think that question needs to be rephrased to, how do you create a home where learning is a family value? If you want your children to love learning, you must show them that learning matters to you, which is not by the same way as showing them that grades matter to you. Children start to learn family values around preschool age. Before age 4 or 5, as far as kids are concerned, adults are more alike than they are different. They're slow moving, they get grouchy about things that don't really matter, they eat food that's just stupid, they're all kind of the same. Things change when a child visits a friend's house and they start to compare. And the child thinks, you know, I had dinner at Jim's house and we didn't finish our plates and we still got dessert. And it dawns on the child, my parents just made that rule up. It's not a law or anything. Parents create rules about things that matter to them. That's one of the ways they communicate values to their children. There was an unspoken rule when I was growing up that my parents would never interrupt me or my sisters if we were reading. Naturally, whenever my mother or father started thinking out loud about what chores needed doing, I ran and grabbed a book. I thought I was very clever. It was a number of years before I saw I was the one being played. Parents communicate values in many other ways. For example, every family has myths that are retold through generations. What are the themes of these stories we think are worthy of repetition? Every family has heroes. Who did your parents speak of with respect? What characteristics made someone worth emulating? Graduates, it may seem odd that I'm talking to you about family values now when many or most of you don't have families of your own. But if you're not a family already, you're about to become a nascent family of one. You will be the author of the values in this family. It's up to you to create an independent life that you feel is in accord with those values. The fourth preschool principle for lifelong learning is to make small but intentional choices that show you hold learning as a family value. That means it's not an activity that you try and make time for. As a value, it's shot through your daily life and touches everything. Decisions you make, your relationships, how you see the world. One of the things that makes the University of Virginia so special is that you're surrounded by faculty, administration, staff, and fellow students for whom learning is a treasured value. That shared value makes for a very supportive environment. It's easy to be a learner here. Lifelong learning outside the university will prove more challenging, but I'm confident that your experiences here have provided the foundation you need to continue learning for a lifetime. But maybe think about that tomorrow. Today, celebrate your achievements with your loved ones and accept my warmest congratulations and best wishes for the future, class of 2024.